In 2016, I was a broke college freshman who, instead of buying useful things for school like more books, calculators for class, etc., stuff that I need, I spent the rest of my money in my bank account buying a ticket to Los Angeles, California, to attend an event being held there called Call of Duty XP. This event was the second of its kind, the first one being for the original Modern Warfare 3. This was essentially a massive convention open to the public who could purchase a spot to be there, and you get to experience all kinds of cool Call of Duty related stuff. Many fans of the game, YouTubers, press, and even many developers from each COD studio were in attendance. I always credit this event as being a pivotal moment in my life, as not only was it the first time me as a young, naive 17-year-old kid ever visited LA, but meeting everyone who I've spent years watching, who inspired me to do the best that I can at making videos on my own channel, since I realized that this is what I love. I don't think my channel would be anywhere where it's at today if I hadn't gone to this event, but more so to the point of today's video, at COD XP 2016, there was a variety of things being showed off and unveiled. The first was the brand new Call of Duty Infinite Warfare title, with even a playable multiplayer demo at the event. There was also a small group of us who got to watch an early trailer for Revelations, the final DLC Zombies map in Black Ops 3 before it was officially announced. And there was even a playable demo and a real-life recreation of zombies in Spaceland. However, by far the most popular tent out of all of the playable booths there was for the COD 4 remastered multiplayer. By comparison, the tent where you could go and sit down and play Infinite Warfare was usually dry as a bone. You could walk in and sit and play immediately with no wait time. However, the lines would be consistently so long to play the COD 4 remaster that you'd spend 2, sometimes up to even 3 hours in line for a single play session. This just displayed how unpopular IW was comparatively to the hype that the COD 4 remaster was bringing to the table. Yet amongst all the chaos of the things there, the tent that went by far under the radar the most was the Zombies in Spaceland booth, overshadowed by pretty much everything else in attendance. This was something that not everyone experienced, a replica of Spaceland and a short playable demo with very limited features. Luckily, I had the opportunity to play this early, and how I feel about it now has certainly changed a bit in the last 10 years since its initial release. If you know anything about Infinite Warfare, then you surely know that it suffered from devastating reputation damage long before it ever actually came out, and I've explained why that was the case in many videos before. But for Zombies more specifically, it was fighting a massive uphill battle for 2 distinct reasons. Firstly, the reputation of Infinite Warfare at large encompassed the Zombies mode to a degree, whether or not it was even justified, right? The hate would automatically apply to Zombies. Secondly, it was also coming off the heels of the insanely popular, beloved, and much more serious Black Ops 3 Zombies, which would just inevitably overshadow anything IW had to offer then. In some ways, I genuinely feel quite bad that this game, and specifically Zombies, had to come out under the circumstances that it did. There was just no competing with COD 4 multiplayer remastered and Black Ops 3 Zombies, which was reaching its biggest strides ever seen. The eclipse of these other projects made Infinite Warfare overall seem like an inferior product, and IW Zombies feeling like a silly, cheap knockoff of Treyarch Zombies. Why we would assume this to be the case is honestly not hard to understand, but looking back, I don't think we could have been more wrong, as Infinite Warfare Zombies is actually one of the most unique Zombies experiences, and I might even argue one of the most unique video games, period, that we've ever seen. If you've been keeping up with Call of Duty Zombies, especially in the last 6 years since the release of Black Ops Cold War, it's going to come as obvious to you that a major criticism of modern Zombies is that it is severely lacking in personality. The amount of complaints directly about or adjacent to the idea that modern Zombies is lacking personality is not hard to find at all. It's missing all of those little details and heart and charm that was clearly present in these past experiences. experiences, or that's the claim anyways. And while it's definitely more complicated than that, I think you can look at the modern zombies formula and kind of see why people would make this case. The seemingly bland and uninspired maps, the lackluster art design and direction, a lot of the overused and out-of-place Warzone systems and those mechanics, and just a general lack of identity and charm that defined individual COD Zombies experiences back then, even in non-Treyarch titles. If there's a big problem with COD Zombies these days, it's not really its gameplay. I mean, it's taken this formula that it's had since Cold War and certainly advanced, refined, and polished it quite a bit, and it is pretty decent gameplay at this point. Like, it's a very good foundation and a good pace. Where it lacks the most, however, is in the personality department. And honestly, part of that is because of the gameplay choices, and not purely aesthetic direction. By contrast, IW Zombies is a game mode with nothing but personality, even arguably too much at times. This game oozes personality at every single moment. Something I criticize a lot about modern zombies is just how homogenized everything has become. Everything from the UI, the systems, those all look the same now. Armor and even in-game mechanics have been plain and boring from the beginning. And all of these systems, map to map, are pretty much identical with very little deviation, meaning effectively, when you boil it down, the only real differences between many of these modern maps are scenery and its quest and wonder weapon. Infinite Warfare Zombies falls on the complete opposite end of that spectrum by comparison. There are unique icons for everything, custom spawn-in animations depending on your character or even between maps, secret celebrity characters with their own animations and voice lines, map-specific weapons and tools and equipment, and so much more. Each and every map in Infinite Warfare Zombies is fundamentally unique, even if all of the aspects or even whole maps themselves don't necessarily work for me all that well. They are, without a shadow of a doubt, one of a kind, and sometimes that is a massive compliment, and other times, not so much. Despite its significantly less serious appearance, all things considered, IW Zombies is no walk in the park. In fact, they did many things to introduce, accessibility to the game. For example, the Afterlife arcade. When you die, instead of being taken out of the game completely and having to spectate, you actually go to the Afterlife arcade and can play a bunch of different games in these rooms for a self-revive token to get back in. Plus another handful of, small changes to make the Zombies gameplay loop a bit more approachable for a newcomer. But honestly, going back to play it now, you'd be surprised about how challenging and unforgiving the gameplay can be at times. And not only the, sheer moment-to-moment stuff, but even some of the Easter eggs and specifically side quests are downright insane. Look me in my eye and tell me that you actually want to solve this raw, without a cheat sheet, every time you play to just get the wonder weapon. It's actually a fairly hard game at times, and they did manage to slightly lower the barrier to entry for zombies without completely obliterating the skill ceiling as well, which is very impressive and admirable if you ask me, and something that I've come to really appreciate about this as time has passed. There are several things that made Infinite Warfare Zombies unique, but one of the biggest ones was that it was the second ever non-Treyarch zombies to be made. The first was Exo Zombies from Advanced Warfare at Sledgehammer Games. This was a first for Infinity Ward, with Brian Bright and Lee Ross being the project leads. What is clear right away is just how much of their own personalities they imparted onto IW Zombies, growing up in the 80s and wanting to do something tonally completely opposite to Treyarch. Also, while again, I did mention how they wanted to make zombies slightly more accessible from the lighthearted theme they have and a few gameplay changes to entice new players a bit more, but even with that in mind, they don't seem overly focused on making the game accessible for literally everyone. It genuinely seems that they, wanted to lower the barrier to entry a little bit, but they still wanted to make something for zombies fans and something that they thought would be cool. This is why there's such a unique flavor to IW Zombies. There is little to no regard for what the multiplayer or hypothetical battle royale mode is doing. They're just here to make their own thing, and whoever enjoys it will probably really be into it. This is why I think IW Zombies has the cult following that it does. It was not made for everyone. Cold War Zombies was a mode that was intentionally made for everyone in a way, and I just don't think that Cold War Zombies will ever have quite the same passionate following for that game specifically because it's not pointed enough in a sense, and in a way, we're still kind of playing it in Black Ops 7. I mean, we're going to look at all of the maps in Infinite Warfare Zombies individually because they're all super interesting in their own ways, and in order for you to have a good baseline to hook players, you really need a strong starting map for a first impression. This would ultimately lead to the birth of the original idea of zombies in Spaceland. So, how well does Infinite Warfare Zombies hold up 10 years later? But before we can even really discuss the maps, we first have to understand all of the changes and new systems IW was bringing to the table for the game as a whole. Infinite Warfare would take a lot of inspiration from Black Ops 3 Zombies systems, particularly the Gobblegums and weapon kits, the latter pretty much being the exact same idea as BO3, the ability to customize your gun with attachments that you personalize for when you acquire them in-game. However, in IW, these weapons could sometimes also come with stat changes and a handful of unique perks. For example, a perk might spawn a nuke every 100 zombie kills you get, or another one might double your damage output outright, or some were not as dramatic though, like increasing your ADS speed or reducing hipfire, something like that, but weapons were obtained through supply drops which could be paid for or crafted with scrap, which took a pretty absurdly long time to grind for, especially in zombies. This is one of those things that, once again, as much as I love IW, I really don't miss a system like this. These like low-key actual gambling mechanics for, stat changing weapons in the game is a slippery slope that, they've definitely pulled back on a little bit, but it was not my favorite implementation here. But besides that, we also had Fate and Fortune cards, which were pretty similar as well, essentially having the same format as Gobblegums. You had Fate cards, which are like the classics, right, the more basic but unlimited use ones, whereas Fortune cards were consumables. They were the Mega Gobblegum in this context. As far as I'm concerned, these systems in the menu aren't anything groundbreaking or super innovative, but they don't really need to be. They're an out-of-game system that can deepen the gameplay to a degree, but it's certainly not mandatory for experiencing the main content of the game. Although I will say, upon going back, a lot of these names for Fate and Fortune cards are just hilarious. And again, it's like a lot of that personality and risk, you might say, really shines through here. I think they're very charming if they're, basically inspired by Gobblegum in BO3. But anyways, FNF cards and weapon kits would become a staple of the mode, and players familiar with BO3 would already mostly be accustomed to this. This would also be able to accentuate and highlight all of the more unique aspects of the maps going forward, beginning with Zombies in Spaceland. They say first impressions are everything, and IW Zombies makes a bold impression with Zombies in Spaceland. And in a way, Zombies in Spaceland is kind of Infinite Warfare Zombies. It is essentially the face of this game mode. It's what people think of. And it's crazy how the recent Zombies maps up to this point took place in war-torn Stalingrad, or a twisted remote Japanese island. And then to go from there to an 80s amusement park was a massive tonal whiplash, to say the least. But despite the hard shift in aesthetic and tone direction, the gameplay is honestly not all that unfamiliar. Spaceland and its gameplay loop are strikingly classic for a project this ambitious. You have all of your basic Zombies elements intact. You start with only a pistol, zombies break down boards to get into the park, and the entire layout takes inspiration from Der Riese, with a main pack-a-punch machine in the middle only being unlocked after you visit all of these surrounding locations and link their respective teleporters. This kind of map layout works for many reasons. It gives an interconnectedness to the layout, making it easy to get around, but it also allows for distinct areas to exist. Polar Peak looks visually and thematically much different to the arcade, which itself looks much different to the Kepler system. Spaceland's personality makes a very strong impression because of how visually unique all of the different areas can be. Even being able to access the underside storage hallways of the park just makes this feel very whole. Now, I would make the argument that IW designed a large majority of the game's systems with Spaceland specifically in mind, even though, the rest of the following maps would take place in vastly different time periods and settings. Things like the Afterlife arcade or even the Lost and Found box make complete sense to be in the 80s and in a theme park, right? An Afterlife arcade or a Lost and Found box make less sense on a futuristic space station. And this isn't really a criticism. What I am saying, though, is that Spaceland clearly was the map that was the original birthplace of the idea and had the most care and attention to detail. And I mean, that much should be obvious, right? You can just look around the map and play it for yourself and just see how every pixel, how much care and personality radiates from all of them. The relatively straightforward map design allows new players to quickly get familiarized with the map, and there's even a guided tour on solo that shows hints and explains things as you play if you choose to do it. But beyond that, Spaceland keeps its secrets very close to the vest. We're used to modern zombies now giving us a directed mode, which holds your hand through the Easter egg, but Spaceland, despite its approachable atmosphere, has several more hidden secrets that are honestly quite difficult to encounter. On my revisit of this game, I had actually forgotten how short the main Easter egg quest is. Spaceland's main Easter egg is literally 2 steps. You collect 3 parts to build a SETICOM, you give it to David Hasselhoff. Oh yeah, did I mention David Hasselhoff was a celebrity character in this map?
Which,
yeah, they got the Hoff, but you take the thing that he gives you, and then you defend it at 3 locations in the map, and then you go to the boss fight. It's that simple. Despite its relative simplicity and length compared to Easter egg quests we're used to nowadays, it is not easy. In fact, the road to the main quest is deceptively simple, as going into the boss underprepared is pretty much an impossible task. I gained a newfound appreciation for Spaceland when I realized its design philosophy, and it's something I actually talked about in my recent Elden Ring video. The golden path is what is, in video game design, basically the desired progression path for the player to go from start to finish. In this case, we can say the golden path is from spawn to beating the boss fight, and it's the main quest. But even though there's not a lot of steps in that golden path, there's all of this surrounding content and other secrets around the map that will level you up and prepare you to make you far stronger for when you actually do encounter that boss. But all of that content is ultimately optional, meaning you voluntarily choose to engage with that stuff if you want it, and that voluntary engagement feels so much better than being forced to do something. Imagine Spaceland's Easter egg if you had to get and upgrade all 4 laser wonder weapons, even if you're playing solo, and you had to build the exquisite and all of this other stuff on the HUD. It would start to feel a little bit chore-like, and this is why Spaceland's short main quest is not a problem for me. Ideally, you're supposed to spend your time preparing, discovering, and engaging with the map's secrets that will reward you with the means to defeat the boss. I love this design style. Also, it means that it has enough stuff to do that you don't even need to think about doing the main quest to have a good time. There's plenty of enough stuff to play with and have fun in the map without even trying to beat the aliens. There's a handful of really unique traps that are all situated into different theme park amusement rides. There's an arcade with actual old school Activision game machines. There's basketball, skee-ball, a water shooting game, and so on. Playing any one of these games or using traps will give you tickets, a completely separate currency to your normal money. This is why I say IW Zombies and the systems were built from the ground up for Spaceland, because the ticket system, unfortunately, does not appear on any other map in the game. Tickets can be exchanged for anything ranging from black hole grenades to teleporters, Armageddon, cryo-freeze grenades, and even the Forge Freeze wonder weapon, golden teeth, or even one of the most interesting being an arcane core. These things are basically alternate ammo types that you apply to your weapons, but arcane cores have to be infused with different elemental properties at various locations around the map. You have to work for them a little bit more. Like in Black Ops 3, it was as simple as just putting your weapon back into the Pack-a-Punch machine for a random elemental type, but they made it a bit more involved in this game. In a way, tickets work like salvage in modern zombies games, but just that, it's a lot more fun in this context. And as good as it is here in Spaceland, the fact that it doesn't appear or evolve into any other maps makes it more special for sure, but it also makes the other maps feel a bit lacking by comparison, and we'll get to that a bit later. Arcane cores are actually needed to get the map's wonder weapons initially, those being the laser pistols, and they're some of my favorite wonder weapons in all of zombies, from their visual design to their actual performance as well. Once again, while the idea of having 4 elemental wonder weapons was not a new concept for zombies, IW Zombies certainly did it in a way that was inspired and fun. These were vital in dealing with the brute that was the map's mini-boss, a giant zombie with a park mask that can also fire a laser from its face. I don't have any problems with the Spaceland brute as an enemy. I think he's fine, but rather unremarkable for special enemies for its impact on the gameplay. Something you will notice while killing zombies is that they will start to drop these colored coins. These tokens you can put into various machines around the map to give you different craftables. This system is still so much fun. Even now, like, I had forgotten all of what the color combinations give you, and I was just having a great time experimenting with different outcomes and getting stuff like Kindle Pops or the Boombox, which is essentially a really good monkey bomb. There's also the Medusa device, which is like a pocket nuke, laser and electric traps, and so much more. It's really weird to me though, because this system was of course designed for Spaceland, and it also does appear in DLC 1, but after that, IW would completely drop the coin system just like they did for tickets. There's even a unique power-up that zombies can drop that gives you a weapon upgrade that Pack-a-Punches your weapon to an extra level, and we should probably talk about Pack-a-Punch as well, as getting the ability to upgrade your guns initially is as simple as linking all of the teleporters, but double Pack-a-Punch is a bit more involved. You have to get the alien fuses. This process would change every single map of getting fuses right to place into the machine. That gives you access to double Pack-a-Punch, but going that extra step for double Pap was pretty much always worth it. There was also a handful of more obscure and difficult side quests, getting these glasses that, that will fall around the map, make it black and white, and that allowed you to see things that were otherwise invisible. If you collected enough skulls that were very hidden, you could go to the arcade and play a special game called Ghost and Skulls. It's definitely a bit of a process getting here, but the Ghost and Skulls machine gives you a minigame to destroy all of the skulls in the machine without them escaping. This idea would be iterated on and modified in future maps. They would make the game more complicated, but Spaceland has the most simple one. Beating this really fun minigame awarded you with a full perkaholic, which was quite nice considering that the standard IW Zombies perk limit was 5. If you managed to get the SETICOM defended at all of the locations around the map, you then had to go back to the main area and initiate a Simon Says sequence. You're locked in this room, and if you get it wrong or take too long, this sequence that it gives you, the order changes and you have to kill a brute. This step is, once again, on paper, very simple, but in practice, I actually remembered to be pretty challenging. If you successfully manage all 3 rounds of that though, the aliens will spawn in, and you'll get more aliens the more players in your game that you have. But in solo, you have 1 alien to deal with. This boss fight is genuinely hard. Coming back to IW, I forgot how brutal the game can be at times. You have to survive the onslaught of zombies and deal enough damage to the alien that he enters a temporary downed state. But if you manage that, you only have a few seconds to melee the fuse off of his back, and then you gotta do this 2 more times. Interestingly, this boss fight was so hard for players players on launch that it had to be nerfed like a week after IW released. It's not easy at all, despite the idea being pretty simple. If you manage to survive long enough to down the alien again and get the other fuse off of his back, the next time you just have to deal enough damage to end the alien once and for all. And typically in a normal zombies map, that would be the end, right? Like that would just roll the cutscene. But there's actually another step to this quest after you get the fuses. You then have to go into the Pack-a-Punch room, make sure you have the laser gun, and then you need to come back out and make sure to charge up these panels, these rings, at just the right time the UFO flies overhead to shoot the laser from the center and take it down. This requires some pretty precise timing, and only then is the main Easter egg complete. You'll then be awarded a piece of the Soul Key, a very mysterious item that's use isn't quite apparent yet. All this time later, though, I think that Zombies in Spaceland is genuinely still a masterpiece. It's obviously not going to work for everybody. It makes stylistic choices that honestly can be quite polarizing. Having celebrity characters and strong theming and attention to detail at this level creates a really one-of-a-kind atmosphere, and one that I feel boldly sets the tone for how the rest of the game is probably going to look and feel. However, I love Spaceland's design choices and the massive sandbox of just different and unique features that you can't find anywhere else, like a roller coaster. It's just plain fun. And even if you have no interest in doing the map's Easter egg, there are plenty of little things that can be enjoyed because it has so much to offer for casuals and hardcore players all the same, which is what makes it such an appealing map. Spaceland is brilliant. It has heart, passion, personality, all in one well-presented and well-designed package. Despite using a lot of tried and true and safe design choices, they were by no means done taking risks, and this would become very apparent in the following map, DLC 1. Infinity Ward wasn't satisfied with even keeping their zombies mode constrained to one particular time period either, as the premise allows them to essentially go wherever and whenever. Which, by the way, I haven't really talked much about the story or premise of IW. It obviously has nothing to do with Treyarch zombies. It's its own story where this big filmmaker named Willard Wyler is using these 4 actors and trapping them in his own films, but there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes, which we uncover as the maps go on. But this premise allows them to do literally whatever they want because it's a film, right? They can have any fictional time setting in a different time period or in a different location. It's just a very clever way to give themselves much more creative breathing room for future maps. Where Spaceland takes place in an 80s amusement park, Rave in the Redwoods takes a vastly different tone, instead being the sort of stereotypical 90s slasher film. The changes in location and time setting are much more than purely visual though, as right off the spawn, the character's HUD and their player card UI changes, their intro music is different, and even what you spawn in with holding, or in this case, not holding, is different. Rave is a neat diversion where you don't spawn with anything in your hands, not even the starting pistol, the Kendall, not only adding to that sense of danger that you feel in slasher movies, that helplessness, but it also encourages you to look around for something else, and around the cabin are a handful of unique melee weapons, all slasher tropes, and actually serve as your primary early game weapon rather than the standard Kendall. The layout of Rave in the Redwoods is not quite as cut and dry as Spaceland with a main hub and then several offshoot locations. Rather, Rave has more of a circular design with some paths to interconnect faraway areas. The zombie models are obviously completely different to Spaceland as well. And seriously, I find this to be one of the most charming things about IW Zombies. Like, the amount of unique enemy designs for specific maps was just extremely refreshing. Not only that, but every map also has unique special enemies and mini-bosses, the Spaceland clowns being the first, and then Rave having these kind of like unsettling Yeti creatures. The Pack-a-Punch process is rather straightforward and honestly about the same complexity as Spaceland. You simply find 3 boat parts that are in static areas around the map. You build the boat, you grab a film reel laying next to the dock house, and look, I've clowned on this boat ride to the island before because it's definitely not the most exciting thing, and when you compare it to the very captivating and exciting Pack-a-Punch journeys like Gorod Krovi riding the dragon or something, it definitely feels a bit silly. I can see them wanting to do something quiet and moody with this moment, but it's always just felt a little bit awkward, really. It doesn't have quite the immersion that maybe they were going for. Perhaps if something could happen occasionally while you're in this boat, that might spice things up, or hell, even if there was just a way to fast travel to the island once you've unlocked it and done this boat ride once, it might be a bit more tolerable, because every time you go to Pack-a-Punch or come to this island, you have to do this slow-ass boat ride every single time. With how interconnected Spaceland was with teleporters, I'm honestly shocked there isn't a faster way to get to the Pack-a-Punch after the first time. Either way though, arriving at the island, you'll enter the cabin and meet Kevin Smith.
Call of Duty, Infinite Wars, man.
The big man Kevin Smith is the celebrity character of this map, and it honestly makes perfect sense. He's also the first step of the main Easter egg. After speaking with him, you'll get your other film reel here and then unlock Pack-a-Punch. Something you'll immediately realize that's missing from Spaceland was, again, the ticket system, and there's no real substitute for this either. It's just kind of an aspect that's now gone. Not to say that Rave doesn't have its own standout things, but the sandbox aspect does feel a bit diminished in this way without it. Rave does have 4 unique wonder weapons, once again, this time in the form of crossbows that can be upgraded through their own quests. These quests take advantage of Rave's most different and strange mechanic. You see, as you kill zombies, instead of getting those Spaceland glasses that turn everything black and white, you'll get a bag of, substance. These can be thrown in the fire pits at various spots in the map to enter Rave mode. This makes the color scheme and visual presentation of the map completely change, allowing you to see things otherwise invisible. But that's not the only thing it does. Rave mode also summons the Slasher to appear. The Slasher is the map's mini-boss and is a genuinely terrifying presence and an extremely dangerous enemy capable of outrunning you and nearly one-shotting you if you get hit by the saw. But most of the time, when Rave mode wears off, so too does the Slasher disappear. This means there's a fun risk-reward thing going on with Rave mode. You do need it for a vast majority of main quest steps and side Easter eggs alike, but it's far more dangerous to spend any significant amount of time in this mode. While we're on the topic of Easter eggs, the main quest is honestly not all that different to Spaceland in terms of complexity. Again, it goes for that very short golden path approach, but makes it deceptively easy, as it would be really stupid to try to take on this boss fight without any preparation. But as far as the main quest steps themselves are concerned, it's pretty straightforward. It involves you picking up 3 different photographs around the map and then cleansing them by collecting souls for them in Rave mode in specific ways, either getting arm shots, leg shots, or head shots. It's not overly challenging or complex. The steps themselves are arguably easier than Spaceland's SETICOM defense. To be honest, it's really not too bad, but cleansing all of the photos reveals to Kevin Smith that he's the one who killed Jay, and then he falls into the water and becomes the Super Slasher.
No, this has got to be a fucking mistake. I didn't kill him. I couldn't have killed him. Oh man, Jay, man, Jay, I gotta get out of here. I gotta find Jay. Jay! Oh, ah!
The Rave in the Redwoods boss fight is pretty different and very unique for the time, and it showed me just how much farther ahead IW was in front of Treyarch with boss fight design. Even though Treyarch in recent years has actually been making some pretty fantastic bosses, specifically in Black Ops 6 and 7, IW was so far ahead of the curve that we haven't really seen unique designs like this since then. You go to the island in permanent Rave mode. The Super Slasher runs you down the entire time, and you have to fill up 2 soul boxes pretty quickly. Afterwards, bringing him to a ritual circle, and then you can rip him out of Rave mode to do damage. After destroying all of the protected protective glyphs on him, you then need to survive waves of stronger skeleton enemies without leaving the green safe circle and repeat again. But each time the island gets walled off and you get a bit less playable space, making mistakes more punishing, and every movement has to be more thoughtful and intentional. If you survive another 2 waves of that, you then just need to deal enough bullet damage to the Super Slasher to finally defeat him for good. This boss really solidified for me that they're capable of way more than just copy-pasting the same boss ideas map to map, and I don't like it quite as much as Spaceland's aliens admittedly, and it's not nearly as hard as that fight either, but it is pretty long as well, and there are multiple repeating phases, but it's still fun and quite a well-made boss fight in my opinion.
Fortune be like they're fucking real. There were a bunch of them.
All I'm gonna have them do?
Hundreds.
There's some other pretty curious and rather unique mechanics. For example, Rave brings the token system back from Spaceland, but instead, this time they're gems that you put into these totems to get your rewards. Oh, also, I almost completely forgot to mention, Rave in the Redwoods is one of the only zombies maps, I think, that you can throw glizzies around. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's epic. There's also a throwing knife game that you can play for extra cash in the basement of the cabin. There's also these memory charms that you can collect and then get like lore out of, and they also serve as special weapon charms attached to your gun. The crossbows are all special and different, although admittedly, by far the best one is the Ben Franklin, aka the lightning bow. It's still by far the most dominant. Welcome back, Der Eisendrock. All in all, I've always liked Rave in the Redwoods. It has a lot of heart and a lot of charm, just like Spaceland does. Ghosts and Skulls 2 returns, but even, modified with new mechanics for this map. There's a lot to love about Rave, despite it dialing back the sandbox fun of Spaceland just a little bit. But spoilers, I feel like IW started out on a really high point with zombies in Spaceland, but each and every single DLC map would go a little bit downhill in quality from that point. Rave may have just been a very slight step down from Spaceland, but still really enjoyable in its own right. But Infinity Ward would start to take some serious massive risks and really change the formula from this point on. Shaolin Shuffle is such an oddball map. In some ways, I really like it, and it has some of the best stuff that IW Zombies has to offer. Also, in other ways, it has some of the worst, most baffling, tedious, and annoying things Infinite Warfare Zombies tried too. The concept, again, is vastly different to the prior maps. Shaolin Shuffle takes us to the Big Apple in the 1970s. This allows for extremely unique aesthetics and gameplay situations, and of course, style. This is apparent right away from spawning in. You enter in the grimy subways of New York City, and the atmosphere is set pretty much immediately with the character designs, the HUD, the atmosphere, and the music choices. Something I haven't really talked about just yet until now are the power switches on the map, and this might seem kind of weird. You see, IW is a little bit odd in this regard because there doesn't seem to be any consistency or rhyme or reason about how they set up turning on the power. In Spaceland, it's fairly standard, right? Each major area also contains a power switch, usually near one of the corresponding teleporters. They go hand in hand. It's pretty intuitive. Rave actually just has one big master power switch, and that is turned on after making a full loop of the map and then getting under the cabin where you started. Makes sense. It, completes the loop. Shaolin, though, is like, there's a power switch in spawn, but it's not the master power, nor is it really for a major section exactly. There's also another one here by the Deadshot machine, another one here on the rooftop of the disco, yet another power switch in the subway. It is by no means a massive problem or a deal breaker for me, but I would just describe this system as unintuitive. Similarly, I would also say that's the case for Pack-a-Punch as well. You need 3 items for the Pack-a-Punch to unlock. One of them has like 6 different spawn points around the map, one of them is a fixed location under the jug machine every single time, and the other has 3 or 4 different spots, but one of those spots you can only access if you've gotten the first item already. It's odd, but despite its unconventional setup, this does give you access to the pink cat while also granting you Pack-a-Punch, and then the whole map opened up. The celebrity character in Shaolin Shuffle would be Pam Grier, another Hollywood legend from that era. In this map, she is essentially your sensei and guides you along your path. She gives you the option of 4 different fighting styles: the Tiger, Dragon, Crane, and Snake. Honestly, I wouldn't even exactly call these wonder weapons, even though it follows like the same formula of one, right, that every player can have. Not only because Shaolin does actually have a more traditional wonder weapon in the nunchucks and the katana, but these are just like, the cheese are just additional melee options that you can use and upgrade as you play. However, despite them being kind of fun and very different, they're actually not all that useful for general gameplay outside of the, starting the main quest and then opening up these specific Torii gates to open the area. Not to mention, I don't know if they were meant as a counter to the map's special enemy, but these things are by far my least favorite enemy type in IW, and that's saying a lot, honestly. The ninja zombies are just downright horrible. These are unlike the clowns or the yetis or even the roller skating zombies in this map as well, which are fine, but the ninjas act as the mini-boss. They deal lots of damage to you, but how they move is the most annoying. They're able to teleport to you, and if you sprint specifically, it's practically asking to be downed. They auto-track and then just melt you for running, which is an idea that I don't hate on paper, but in execution leads to one of the most frustrating and least enjoyable zombie types to fight. Regardless, though, there are ways to effectively deal with them. I just don't think that they're like an objectively good or fun enemy to fight. But in regards to the main Easter egg, at this point in IW Zombies, the average player can get to a point where they could reliably learn and do the main quest in Spaceland and Rave purely from memory, right? It's pretty much just remember where the parts spawn. But this short but sweet golden path idea was pretty much gone in exchange for Shaolin Shuffle being the first map in Infinite Warfare to really try to stretch out the length and depth of the main quest. Steps that would be typically reserved for Ghosts and Skulls or other side Easter eggs were starting to creep into the main content now. The first step of the quest is actually pretty easy and also genuinely hilarious, as you have to break this cage and then follow around a low polygon rat for like 4 hours. You then do some soul boxes and, pretty other standard stuff for a while. You encounter the Rat King for the first time, where you then collect his eye. This is where the quest starts to go from a repeatable and memorizable thing to teetering on that edge of annoying. You see, after obtaining the eye, you then need to find 6 Rat King symbols in 13 possible locations around the map. You scan with the eye and then shoot the symbol if it's there. Pretty easy, but that doesn't sound too bad, right? That is until you realize that each symbol only spawns one at a time, meaning if you shoot one, you then have to go back and check every single location again until you find another one. If you're solo, this potentially leads to you running around for upwards of 30 minutes chasing these down if you're particularly unlucky. I really don't think that it would be that worse for them from a design perspective if they just made all 6 of them spawn in at one time. You'd still have to check pretty much all of the locations, but it would just make it far less tiresome and monotonous. But unfortunately, the quest only gets worse from here. After shooting a couple of particular things, next you have to translate Morse code from a telephone and then find a poster that it corresponds with. Again, all the prior maps could be done pretty much from memory, but Shaolin was the first map to really demand some kind of cheat sheet or a guide for these steps. After doing the Morse code, you then had to spell a word on the rooftop using a demonic alphabet, which does definitely require a cheat sheet, and the list of words that it can be is also enormous. It's a step that I feel like this is really fun to solve initially and work out as a team. In fact, I was there. I was, in the community helping solve this step when it came out. But having to repeat this over and over again just to do the main quest can become incredibly tedious at a certain point. I don't dislike this step as a concept. I think it's pretty well designed, but it's one of those things that feels more appropriate for Ghosts and Skulls instead of the main Easter egg. If you manage to get past this part, the rest of the quest truly isn't too bad at all. It's just a little bit more soulbox stuff, killing disco zombies, especially carefully in this small area, defeating the Rat King again, and then collecting the third and final piece now that you have the eye, heart, and mind. This all culminates in the final boss fight in the sewer section against the Rat King. In this fight, you're locked in this open circular sewer area, and you actually get to dictate the flow and the pace of the boss fight this time yourself. You can choose what challenges you take on first. The eye is the easiest. You activate this one, and then you just need to shoot symbols around the room after scanning them with the eye that you've gotten used to earlier in the Easter egg, but being pressured by the Rat King and zombies. It's honestly very simple though. The second is the mind, which is pretty much just as easy. You simply need to buy time until the zombies finish eating the brain in the middle of the room while the Rat King attempts to stop them. The third and final is by far the trickiest one. The heart is the real challenge. You need to kill zombies on acid puddles that are spilled over the entire circumference of the arena. However, the acid puddles also damage you as well, so you cannot stay in one place for too long. You also don't have very much time to do this, and all of your actions and kills need to be very deliberate and accurate. This is one of the easiest ones to go down on, but luckily if you die in this fight, you can actually pick up more perk candy from around the room, but also Pam Grier will always come in to revive you if needed, which is pretty nice, if you happen to be struggling with this one. For the final phase, after completing all 3 of these challenges, you just need to destroy the Rat King for good this time, and then the cutscene rolls, giving you yet another piece of the soul key, just like the last maps. If there's one thing to say for certain, Shaolin Shuffle is not lacking in style. The different fighting style cheese, the katanas, the nunchucks, the music setting, the atmosphere, and everything make for a really distinct and still memorable zombies map atmosphere. There's absolutely no denying that it has style and lots of personality. However, where I feel it starts to lack are the things that made IW so appealing in the beginning that they're clearly stripping away. The fun ticket system and tokens and gems are just not in this map at all anymore, and all of the more sandboxy aspects of the mode were starting to diminish in exchange for a longer, more involved main quest, and maybe that's fine to a degree, and while there is still plenty to enjoy and appreciate about Shaolin Shuffle, I can't help but feel that it's starting to miss some of the charm that made the 2 prior maps work. And I get at this point in the game, the DLCs were coming out, and it's more like they probably felt it was time to challenge the players because the hardcore ones were still remaining, or do something different, which I can always appreciate. But that kind of risk-taking displayed in Shaolin Shuffle is honestly nothing compared to what they would try next in DLC 3. What is a zombies map to you? What makes that feeling of a map come alive? For some, zombies is a dark, claustrophobic, enclosed environment meant to trap you and feel tense, the walls closing in around you and no real way out of the darkness. Whatever a zombies map is to you or evokes that feeling, I bet that Attack of the Radioactive Thing is the complete opposite of everything I just mentioned. Attack of the Radioactive Thing would be DLC 3 as set in a 1950s monster movie. I'm just going to call this map Attack because the full name is long as hell and I don't want to say it every single time. But regardless, you think a zombies map is dark? Not the case here. Despite it starting similar to Ascension being black and white initially, this only lasts a few moments until full color is restored, and you can see that the colors are bright, and I wouldn't say vibrant as they are still kind of washed out maybe to fit the theming better, but it's still colorful nonetheless. You think a zombies map is enclosed and oppressive? Attack is a big, wide open beach, open parks, and vast stretches of empty space. Now, I can actually respect and appreciate the risk at turning the entire vibe and established tone of what zombies is on its head to just give it a go, but that's the kind of risk-taking I think modern zombies is severely lacking. Yet, I still cannot say that Attack is a better map purely for that fact. Elvira would be the celebrity character in this film, which is a notable choice for 2 big reasons. She would actually be the final celebrity character to appear in the entire game, also because she and Paul Rubens, who plays Willard Wyler, were actually good friends apparently. She serves essentially as like the dungeon storyteller or a witch basically, and asks you to make potions and fill up vials for her to use for some reason, and then only then does she decide to help you out. When I talk about the inconsistency in the power switches of the maps, Attack is definitely no different. You might expect a map this massive to have multiple power switches for different areas at least, but instead, a map this big, it's a single handle that you dig up at the beach, bring it to the power station, and then that's it for the entire map. And again, that's not a bad thing. Again, just a weird choice given the relative scale of everything. It's just, I just don't feel there's any consistency. Speaking of weird, you may notice visually that Attack looks way worse to Spaceland, Rave, or even Shaolin. Its lighting and textures are genuinely really low quality. Even, this is a game on PS4 that like it genuinely matches the quality of like PlayStation 1 or 2 games. And I've always wondered if the look of this was a budgetary or time restriction as to why the map and its surrounding details look so bad, or if it was done intentionally to fit better with the 50s aesthetic. And to be real, I still don't have a definitive answer to that. But given what I know about IW's development, I do suspect it's probably a bit of both. Either way, Attack is also quite unique as it only has one wonder weapon, the MAD, which behaves as a mini thunder gun that cannot be pack-a-punched. However, it can be upgraded via buildables, and it honestly isn't all that good. Like, I guess it's fine, and it can actually be refresh its ammo through the green growths around the map, which is infinite, and that's nice, I suppose, but as like a desired weapon for the general gameplay of this map, it's pretty unremarkable, if you ask me. Where Attack really starts to show its true colors, though, is in the main Easter egg. It takes the fetch quest stuff from Spaceland and Rave, and then the puzzle and solve heavy stuff from Shaolin, and literally cranks both of them up to 11. There's like 7,000 collectible parts around this sprawling area. It is like an omega fetch quest thing. Some are buildables, you know, for other like traps, and some are for side quests, and there's, you know, like 4 different buildables on this map. There are a lot of them for the main quest, and others that you may not even touch in your entire life. In this quest, you essentially need to craft a nuke with the correct chemicals and materials to defeat Crogzilla, the giant pixelated crab in the PlayStation 2 water. However, this is much easier said than done, as it involves you picking up literally almost hundreds of items, and you have to solve some arithmetic, looking at specific equations in different color filters that all change taking that number in the final summation, and then multiplying it by a pi number, using that specific color filter in the office chemistry board reveals the two numbers you need to follow left number for some reason. You're following, right? It's very simple. You also need to enter a number on a pad that is trial and error, and zombies don't leave you alone during this. You only get 3 tries, and then it kicks you off and starts over. Oh, also, you gotta solve it, and then once you solve it, you gotta do it again backwards too. Take a look at this. Definitely something you want to do in your free time in a video game where you're shooting zombies. If arithmetic with the formula changing every single time wasn't enough for you, now you have to listen to a random radio until some guy spouts off a chemical, and then you need to use 68 different items you can pick up around the map to create the proper chemicals, but then you still have to use the summations that you got from the filters to enter into the computer thing. Now, I was there with the community hunting and solving this step. It was interesting for sure trying to work all of this out for the first time, but my god, is it just not fun to have to repeat. You know, I like to joke sometimes that zombies Easter eggs can start to feel like homework, but literally, if this doesn't look like actual homework, I don't know what else to call this. Look, I understand it was getting late in the season and they wanted to make the Easter egg quest hunts longer, but that attitude I feel like always inevitably leads to making annoying steps like this that either require you to literally solve them from scratch or pull out some kind of cheat sheet and just plug in meaningless numbers you don't really care about for your answer. Attack has probably my least favorite main quest in all of IW Zombies. However, it also does contain one of the best boss fights in Zombies history. Crogzilla is too good of a boss battle to be stuck behind one of the least enjoyable main quests. What makes this fight so great, however, is its really unique approach and idea. Instead of just being like a big bad enemy that you shoot until the health bar reaches 0, you first start by having to escort the nuke that you just created down to the beach, all while avoiding the onslaught of meteors and Krogs, which, interesting detail, you can shoot the Krogs out of the sky if you're quick enough to prevent them from spawning. This is like a really neat skill thing that will help you later in the boss. As you work your way down to the beach, you'll also need to write down the code that you got earlier in the main quest, as you'll lose access to it for the final step. But you'll need to bring it back, and Crogzilla will eat the nuke that you made. But you still need to detonate it, so the next phase is using turret lasers to hit weak points on its chest. The hitbox for this is kind of clunky and, a little bit finicky, and I honestly don't love this part, but it's okay for how good the rest of the boss fight is. After that, he starts spewing this green goo onto the beach, pushing you back farther and farther into a corner to where you need to fend off waves of zombies and Krogs with less and less space. After surviving that, you must maneuver a laser maze by precisely jumping and sliding to reach the end of the beach. But you don't have much time at all, and you really need to be on point to get this every time without hitting a laser. If you do make it to the beach in time, you go into Crogzilla's stomach, and then you need to enter that code correctly without making more than 3 errors. Otherwise, it throws you out and you gotta start all over again. It's a pretty brutal boss, truthfully, but very satisfying to play and complete. It's still one of the best and most unique boss encounters that we've ever seen in COD Zombies. And if the rest of the map in Quest wasn't so unconventional and honestly kind of tiresome, I could actually see this being an outstanding map that people highly regard, like Spaceland. But again, as much as I like a lot of elements of Attack of the Radioactive Thing, it does suffer from very odd design choices and lacks many of the cool features that, again, I keep harping on that made this mode so appealing to begin with. They got farther and farther away from that sandbox stuff as the DLC went on in exchange for these really complicated Easter eggs. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but even still, Attack of the Radioactive Thing and all of its risk and odd choices would still be relatively small compared to DLC 4 and the final map of the season, which would just be absolutely insane. All of the baseline rules that it felt like IW Zombies was building off of and following throughout its entire life cycle would be thrown out the window with DLC 4 and the Beast from Beyond. All of IW Zombies maps were set in the relative past, the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, and the 50s, but Beast from Beyond jumps into the far future in the 2200s in an outer space facility in the Extinction universe from Call of Duty Ghosts. Given that this film appears in the Extinction timeline, IW decided to take a really unconventional approach for this map's gameplay. Right from the first moment you spawn in, you'll notice that you spawn with the OSA assault rifle, a subtle nod to the ARX from Ghosts. This wasn't for no reason, however, because upon beginning round 1, you'll notice the lack of zombie spawns. That's because fast-moving, aggressive cryptids are the first thing to pour into the map. Now, I actually think it's such a fun idea to subvert players like this and do something totally out of left field and unexpected. The problem with the cryptids is really their implementation, which will become much more apparent the farther we go. Cryptids in Ghosts were fast, much more aggressive, and harder to hit than zombies, but this was balanced by the fact that they do less damage per hit than, say, a zombie. However, in Beast from Beyond, the cryptids deal the same damage as a normal zombie, despite it still having all of the more dangerous characteristics that they have. I cannot stress enough how much I love the idea of this, including this completely foreign enemy type to a game that you thought you knew, but the way that it's done is just simply not as good as it could be. Cryptids invade the map and then infinitely spawn in waves until the power is turned on, which again, similar to the pattern we've been talking about, there's no rhyme or reason to how this power switch works either. You need to go find Neil, the robot from Spaceland, and then place his head inside the facility mainframe. This turns on the power and then stops the cryptid onslaught and resumes normal zombie spawns. Now, it's been talked about by Lee Ross and Infinity Ward that DLC 4 suffered massively in the budget and time department. That much should be obvious when you play, but you can really tell by the map layout. If I had to describe it, I would say it feels like a rough first draft before they figure out how to make the map flow better and like the final cut of it. It really feels like different segments are just stapled onto each other, and there's lots of empty and wasted space. You have the spawn area of the facility, which leads down the hallways into the main facility floor. This either goes up and then outside to the outdoor area with the pack-a-punch machine, or Or you can go the other way, past the cargo room, and then into a portal that takes you to the Afterlife arcade, but also an outside section or something. The attention to detail that made the atmospheres of the prior maps just, pinpoint and unforgettable, the music, the tones, the celebrities, the colors, all of that is just really lacking here. Plus, not to mention, Beast from Beyond, again, has no celebrity character. Really, if you just compare to a map-to-map basis, Spaceland and Beast from Beyond feel like almost different games entirely. But because this is DLC 4 and IW was already feeling pretty bold in regards to the choice to bring back cryptids, they would also go much farther than that as well. The map flow is really clunky and kind of awkward, but the main Easter egg is a refreshingly straightforward path again. It actually harkens back to the design philosophies of Spaceland and Rave. It's essentially finding a skull for the Ghosts and Skulls machine, which gives you access to the Entangler, which can grab objects and items. You then need to collect 4 floppy disks in a couple of different areas. You kill a cryptid phantom for one, you throw one in a vent, you go to this room to get one, and then there's one at the Pack-a-Punch machine. These discs have to be added to Neil in a particular order according to different, spreadsheets or little clues around the map. Then he shuts down the facility and tries to slam doors on you. You then grab a button off the wall in the arcade, throw it into the poster, push the button, you do a little puzzle, grab Neil's head, and then walk to the Pack-a-Punch machine, and then you're ready for the boss. This really resembles that short path to the boss fight, which again is the deceptively simple thing, because you absolutely positively need to be set up before even trying this boss. It's not just the cryptids that return from COD Ghost, but also one of the wonder weapons of that game, the Venom X. But here's the thing. The actual process for getting this wonder weapon is literally more involved than some entire main quests full stop. It's a difficult and time-consuming process of translating Morse code, entering that into Vignere cipher, doing timed set of mazes that require a cheat sheet to complete, and then you hit a button, but it has to be the right button, and the way that you determine that can only be solved by this complex arithmetic. It's insane. It's actually just too much for the average player to get to, just want to jump on and play around with the wonder weapon. But even if you manage to do all of that and acquire it, upgrading it to the Venom Z is even more complicated. It's a long process and, much more involved than the actual Easter egg. They just went all out on puzzles and quests in this map, making them as involved and convoluted and obscure as possible because it was the last hurrah, essentially, and they could do it. But I don't think that it makes me feel better about the map's experience, honestly. Also, outside of the cryptids, there's not a whole lot of new or interesting enemy types. In fact, it just reuses everything from prior maps. You'll see Spaceland zombies here, Rave, attack zombies, even the ninjas return to Beast from Beyond, which is just, combined with cryptids, is the most, horrible thing humanity's ever done. Just kidding. But, assuming you manage to get all weapons for the boss, you can go up to Neil's head in the Pack-a-Punch room and then enter the cargo area. No transition, no cutscene, just literally drops you in there, and then this is where the cryptid fight begins. This is one of the hardest boss fights in IW Zombies, but I would argue not for entirely fair reasons. You have to start by first killing a few rhinos out of these cargo crates, followed by an onslaught of many cryptids. You then, after a little bit of that, have to disable 3 computers in that map that are keeping these spawning portals open as the cryptids flood into the map. You don't have a lot of time to do these, so you have to be pretty quick. Once again, though, this might not seem like it's that bad on paper, but you have to bear in mind that cryptids, as we established earlier, deal the same damage as a regular zombie, but move 4 times as fast. It's actually insane how quickly you can be deleted in this fight if you happen to take an unlucky turn, reload once at the wrong time, or just get straight up unlucky. But even if you've managed to, get past this, the worst is still to come. You see, next you have to activate this computer that counts down for 100 seconds while you need to withstand very heavy cryptid and rhino spawns. This is a really tough sequence that you can afford literally no mistakes in, and you also have to get just fairly lucky. I swear, the 100 seconds on this computer counts down slightly slower than actual real time, so it feels a lot longer than it is, and that's partly due to just how intense the sequence is, but it's pretty brutal. But if you even survive that, you now have to you face the last phase of blue rhinos. These two just absolutely ginormous things with ungodly amounts of health. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's an additional 250,000 HP per player, or maybe I'm confusing that with George Romero's health. Either way, even so, these things are just straight up tanks, literal bullet sponges that you can't find anything else like that in IW Zombies. Not only will these rhinos one-shot you if you get hit, but they also leave very strong damaging fire on the ground permanently as you shoot them, creating map hazards and cutting off choke points. And this isn't the biggest arena in the entire world. The fire definitely needed to be toned down a little bit, but this sequence can take quite a while unless you have a few really specific meta guns like the Mauler Sentinel or that one EBR or something. But if you beat both of the rhinos, it feels kind of anticlimactic, but that's it. The cutscene rolls, but Infinity Ward wasn't done yet. You see, Lee Ross had already admitted that Beast from Beyond was severely underbaked as a map. They outright say that. But that's because all of the budget and time for development goes into what happens next. We learn that Willard Wyler and all of these celebrity characters were not who we thought they were. Instead, they themselves were being used as puppets to collect souls for Mephistopheles. Lee Ross even makes a little cameo himself too. This brings you to the unexpected peak moment, the face-off against the devil himself.
I shall consume your soul.
I've been waiting the entire video to talk about this moment. It's hard for me to put into words how much I truly love the Mephistopheles boss fight in Infinite Warfare, and it makes the entire fact that Beast from Beyond kind of sucks as a map completely worth it to be able to play this boss. I love, Souls games. I love Elden Ring. It's probably my favorite game of all time. I play all of those games, and I'm no stranger to difficult boss fights, but Mephistopheles is the closest thing that we've ever got to something like that in a first-person shooter game. And once again, as much as I love a lot of the more recent Treyarch boss fights, and they've gotten a lot better, still to this day, 10 years later, we have not gotten anything that even comes close to the design perfection and genius that is Mephistopheles. Now, what exactly is it that makes this boss fight so good compared to other ones? Well, it's a few things. Namely, the setup of this boss fight is that you're in a small arena with 5 talisman ritual circles, and you have to enable each and every single one to raise all of the souls and take down the devil himself. But raising these talismans requires you to stand in a circle in which he can throw a variety of different moves at you, and he gets more moves every time you complete a talisman. So the boss fight escalates in tension and difficulty as it goes on. The first phases aren't so bad, but it's really easy to die in this. That's because one misstep or one wrong move or response pretty much means death. But everything is technically pretty fair and reactable. The only things that I would consider unfair in this fight is genuinely like the last phase where they just start spawning in random enemies at you. If you get a particularly unlucky set of like ninja zombies or cryptids, then yeah, it can kind of feel like BS. But in general, this fight is exceptionally balanced because it's really all about skill. It's all about your responses, your reaction time, and how you react to different moves that he does. All of them have unique animations, and it's the animation that you need to respond to in order to stay alive. It's all about endurance, right? You cannot cheese this fight in any way. There are a lot of phases to it, and it's a pretty long boss battle, all things considered. It's going to take you at least over 10 minutes on a successful run. You have your in-between phases where he spawns, variety of enemies at you from the prior maps, and it's just a really enjoyable, pace of boss fight. It's got proper tension and release, and it's just really demanding the entire way through. There's nothing that I would just play for pure enjoyment more than the Mephistopheles boss fight, and I spent so much time just doing runs and having fun and, trying to get even better at this. As truly genius and immaculate the design of this boss fight is, I actually think it's nearly perfect. I just don't feel like we're ever going to see anything in this realm again. That's because of just the way that Zombies has trended the last couple of years. I don't know if they would even be comfortable designing a boss this truly difficult. And again, while Treyarch has gotten significantly better at boss design and making them more complex and stuff, they've been made more complex in a way that isn't quite like this. When I play Mephistopheles, I can completely acknowledge and understand why Beasts from Beyond is really underbaked, because they put all of their time, energy, and passion into making this boss fight incredible, and it still is. It holds up 10 years later and is still the best boss and my favorite boss fight in all of Call of Duty Zombies, period. And I don't think that'll ever change, to be quite real. I don't think that will ever be dethroned. The final phase after raising all the talismans, where everything goes crazy and it just spawns literally everything you've encountered in IW up to this point, is a really cool peak moment. And if you manage to actually survive and take him down and complete this boss battle, it's exhilarating like no other. And it really, like, it definitely feels like an actual peak moment. That's how you'd want to end IW Zombies on. But defeating Mephistopheles, the cutscene plays. However, that's not the end of this game. In fact, beating Mephistopheles gives you access to something called Director's Mode. And basically, Director's Cut is what we all want out of Super Easter eggs. By far, IW Zombies still has the best end game, as completing all of the Easter eggs gives you this Director's Cut, and that allows you to spawn in every single map with a full perkaholic and 25,000 points. I hadn't even mentioned that as the maps went on, we got some exclusive perks added, like the Deadeye Dewdrops, for example, got added in Shaolin. It's basically a slightly better version of Deadshot, but perkaholic got more powerful as the maps went on, which is pretty cool. Plus, not to mention, Director's Cut makes all of the map's wonder weapons and normal weapons available in the mystery box. Pack-a-Punched and Double Pack-a-Punch is already enabled. This truly feels like a worthy reward, but there's much more reason to play this. When you beat all of the maps, you get access to their special character, and you can enter that in through a little cheat code in the menu to play as them in that map. And if you beat all of the Easter eggs in Director's Cut, that takes you even closer to the true ending. After defeating Mephistopheles, you can then go back to Zombies in Spaceland, where it all began, and play as Willard Wyler himself. Completing Zombies in Spaceland as Willard Wyler, the first map, but with this character, gives you Infinite Warfare Zombies' true ending.
That was rather boring.
Now do you understand? This is why I chose each of you. There is much to do. Shall we begin? The end?
Infinity Ward had something really truly special here with Zombies, and you might wonder at this point, why was there never a follow-up to this, as the cutscene clearly set up the characters, as the new Willard or whatever, put them in the purple suits, and all this open-endedness, right? Lee Ross had actually said publicly that IW Zombies 2 was being prototyped and planned, and was even in pre-production. However, Infinity Ward, settling on Modern Warfare 2019, decided that IW Zombies would just simply not really fit the more realistic tone that it was going for, and so this project would be ultimately scrapped. It's a real shame that this didn't get a sequel, as I would have loved to see where they took the mode next and the risks that they would go for. There is so much personality, depth, and true magical moments to be experienced in this game. Even if the map quality, to me anyways, consistently dipped throughout the season, I feel like they had an amazing first idea and a fantastic execution, but as the maps went on, it strayed further and further away from those awesome ideas. I feel like, I would have preferred to them to take the fundamentals of Spaceland and then expand on those ideas for the DLCs, where it seems like they kind of regressed from that. But either way, I think the boss fights were exceptional, every single one of them, even on maps that I didn't love. Maybe I don't care for this one as much, but I feel the maps suffered from the budget and time restraints for sure as they went on, but with the ending, the high point of Mephistopheles and Director's Cut makes up quite a lot for that, to be honest. In retrospect, it's quite clear and obvious why Infinite Warfare Zombies has the dedicated cult following that it does today. It's really special and has too much personality and charm in ways that modern COD Zombies is just severely lacking in. It also took massive risks in each and every single map instead of totally playing it safe with its systems and ideas, which is what modern Zombies tends to do now. Even if not all of them work or are even very fun, I have to respect them for all of the risk that they took on every single time. This game feels like a moment in time that we can truly never go back to. It's not possible to have a true Infinite Warfare Zombie sequel, as Lee Ross and Brian Bright have long left Infinity Ward at this point, but this special little mode they made will always be here and will always be something that we can truly experience and appreciate all of its bold moments, its successes and victories, and all of its flaws just the same.